Hello and welcome to the Tillage Edge with me, Michael Hennessy. This is your regular update for all your tillage news and advice. A few weeks ago, I chatted to Dara O'Hulacán about the importance of tillage in contributing to biodiversity within the landscape. On all tillage farms, hedgerows are an extremely important part of that biodiversity. So today we're chatting to Keena, an environmental specialist, to talk in detail about these hedges and how to manage these habitats. I first asked Katrin, how important are hedges for biodiversity?
Well, hedges are important for so many reasons, Michael. Even on the biodiversity point of view, they contain lots of flora and fauna. Birds live in them, mammals live in them. But I suppose their main difference with other habitats is the linear nature of them. So they are like roadways for us from a wildlife point of view. So birds, bats, bees, butterflies, everything that goes out follows linear habitats, even to move from where they roost to where they nest, for example, in the case of bats. So they have a huge, they're far more important than the actual area beneath them, if you know what I mean. If they were all put in a corner of a field or an acre of a field, they would not hold or maintain the biodiversity in the area. So they're as networks of nature, corridors for movement. I'd say that's their main importance. And then obviously what's inside them, then you have the trees and the plants and flowers for the bees and homes for the birds, etc., etc. So, they're just full of biodiversity. Then maybe to move on there, we know they sequester carbon. We don't know everything about it. Teagasc and Johnson & Castle are doing further research to quantify exactly how much, measuring everything that moves in and around the hedge, and which hedges sequester more. But we know they're good for carbon. Then they're very good from a water point of view, water quality. A hedge landscape has been shown to have better water quality. Makes total sense to farmers. They act as barriers. They were put there long ago, usually in the places for a good reason. They go with the topography, so they're good from what. Then from a landscape point of view, they're beautiful. They're kind of traditionally part of the Irish landscape. So I could go on and on, Michael, but they are good.
Okay, I sense your passion for sure, certainly about them. So, from what you're saying there, that it's as much the location of the hedges in as much as the hedges themselves. So, if a farmer wanted to remove a hedge, what's the current position in terms of the law of the land out there? Can hedges be removed, or what happens?
Okay, there's two clear things that are very distinct and often get mixed up. We have the EIA for looking for permission, and then we have cross compliance for your BPS, your premium, your money. So the two are separate and not to be confused. Okay, let's go for the permission first of all. The answer to your question is they can be removed. In some cases, they need permission, and with regard to permission from the EIA, the environmental regulations, if you create a new field that's going to be more than 5 hectares, or if you remove 500 metres, you must look for permission to the Department of Agriculture through the EIA. And I say the 5 hectares first, because that's usually the one that hits the farmer, even if they remove less than 500 metres. So 5 hectares or 500 metres, you must look for permission. There has been a very high approval rate for removing those hedges, 80-90% over the number of years since it came in 2011. So you look for permission, and they look at your situation, and you will possibly get it. Then the second point is, and that's the law of the land. And if you don't do that, it's kind of you're brought to court or end up in prison, that side of things. There's no penalty as such, financial penalty. Then not to mix that up with the BPS cross compliance, if you remove any amount of hedgerow, be it 10 metres or up to the 500 metres, you may do that without asking anybody, but you must replant before you replant somewhere else on your holding. So that's quite effective, because I find that it really makes people think twice you won't go out willy-nilly removing them, but it does give the chance to remove one where it's really, really causing an obstacle, and then you replant. Now, definitely the replanted hedge will not be the same value from a biodiversity and the other point of view, because it'll take years and years and years, hundreds of years to have the same value. But nevertheless, new hedges are also good. So yeah, permission plus replant. Yeah.
Okay, so Catherine, so in terms of in tillage fields, it's or for tillage farms, it's kind of difficult to take them out, and as you say, you people have to rightly think about taking them out. So, however, I suppose the other side of it, then machinery's become a good bit better over the last 20 years. There's lots of capacity out there in terms of hedge cutters to, I suppose, tidy up a hedge and make it kind of neat and tidy. Is that kind of the right thing to do then if you don't have a choice about moving a hedge, or is that a good thing anyway?
I suppose tidiness in every farm is not good for biodiversity, even coming back to our lawns or general areas. Tidiness in the point of view of plants. Now, I don't mean tidiness untidy in other ways, but so neat and tidy is not good in general. Short back and sides means there will be no birds or no bees associated with that hedge. So we cannot claim for our green image to have biodiversity living alongside on our farms if we have short back and side hedges. For example, birds will not nest in a hedge that's less than 1.5 meters high. Farmers and contractors will know that during the winter now, at this stage now that the leaves are gone and you're walking along your hedges, you'll see that the nest would be at eye level. They don't nest below that. They're clever enough to know the fox or we'll get them at the ground level, or the birds of prey or the magpies or whatever will get them if they're up near the top of the hedge. So nice, they need cover if they're going to nest in a hedge. So if you have, so that's the main thing. The shape is important, especially if you have a newly planted hedge or where you're starting with a dense space, to try and ideally shape it to kind of a triangular profile rather than a box, because it lets more light at the base, and we want to keep the base growing rather than it's not a race to the top. So ideally, side trim from a wide base to a triangular profile, and still cutting the growing point, because with apical dominance, the tree will grow up into a single tree, and that's fine if we want that kind of a hedge. But if we want a hedgerow that keep its space, we leave it. And the only thing we would ask in that kind of a hedge where you are chopping it, so with the height, we also need some flowers in the hedge, and we can achieve this by leaving an occasional thorn tree. And I specifically say thorn because they are really, really important for flowers for the bees. If you think of the white thorn in May, and why even an occasional tree in every field side would give a huge bounty of flowers for bees, and obviously follow on then the fruit for the birds and mammals in the autumn. So very simple things. I'm not sure that those individual trees, whether they cause a problem for tillage farmers, but in general, they're not, people just don't think about it.
Okay, so obviously maintenance of hedges then is slightly more complicated than just your standard short back and size, as you call it. And you were saying that the ideal shape for a hedge is the A shape, if you like, rather than the square box or the looking like a wall kind of scenario. So where you have a reasonable hedge that's relatively full, if you like, but has been cut in a square shape, if you like, for the last number of years, how long does it take for that, if you're going to shift then across to the A-shaped hedge? How long would it take for that to kind of come to where we would like it to be?
Yeah, and especially maybe if you're thinking of a low hedge, maybe on top of a bank, you might only have a foot there and you want to get it up. It's not a case of, again, a race to the top, because they'll grow, a foot, 18 inches each year. But ideally what you do is you come back down and cut a few inches above last year's cut. So let them up gradually. That's for the height. So, rather than what really wears out a hedge is cutting it back to the same point every year, and maybe cut, because wherever you cut a thorn or any tree, it will sprout beneath it. So it thickens, and then you suddenly come back and put all its energy into putting in 5 shoots, and then you come back and remove them. Whereas if you come back and cut back down to an inch above the 5 shoots, then you'll have 25 the year after. So it's little by little we get the height up, and then little by little with the shape also. So if you are lucky enough to have a dense space just gradually taper it in. It's not the most important, but just you can see if you see, especially on the shady side of a hedge, to get the light down, where possible, to kind of make a bit of a shape in to get and it's ideal then when you are letting the height up a little bit to do both together.
Okay. And could a farmer argue that, look, I have been trimming the hedge in kind of a square shape for the last number of years, and yes, the bottom of it isn't wonderful anymore, but you know what, there's an awful lot of grasses and various other different things in the base of that. Is that not every bit as valuable for wildlife anyway?
Absolutely, Michael. I totally agree that we must consider what do we want out of the hedge. And when we talk about keeping it stock-proof, that may not always be essential. And you're right, I'm looking at a hedge in front of me here on a farm, and, there's gaps between each stem, so the animal could get through, but it's full of stuff. So yes, I mean, it goes back to the margin beside the hedge is equally valuable. So from the bat and bird flying along, as long as there's a non-cropped area, that's kind of a margin. So that slightly argues against having a perfect hedge. But to me, like if it's tall, gappy, row of trees, that is still very valuable for wildlife. So it's really a case of what you want. I think farmers like the dense space, maybe for shelter or for animals, but not maybe so much on tillage farms. It doesn't matter as much.
And where, Catherine, a farmer has a hedge that is that bit gappy and it's a bit leggy, if you like, and that the base isn't wonderful in it, is it possible, or is there any form of success in interplanting that hedge with new plants, if you like, to try and fill it up? Does that work?
Very, very difficult. It's not something I particularly favour. You can try it, you can do it. Planting anything into an existing hedge, it's dry, it's inhospitable, it's difficult. So I would either leave the hedge into the relic hedges, I would say. I tend to like to leave the old relic hedges as they are and maybe plant a new one somewhere else. But if you do want to try, if there's enough stems in that old hedge, the escaped hedge, if it's kind of not gone too bad, there's absolutely no problem in rejuvenating it by cutting it down. The most important thing then is if you are cutting down a hedge to rejuvenate it, to cut it at ground level, not a foot up, not 18 inches up, because then you'll end up with a toilet brush hedge because the growth will be pulled to where you cut. And the other very important thing, if you are rejuvenating a hedge, which tillage farmers are very good at doing, don't forget to leave the occasional old tree that has been there for 200 years that will, even the white thorn, leave one or two thorns where you are cutting back the others. But you will only have a success with that if there's kind of one, at the moment, if there's one stem per metre. If there's too wide a gaps, you're cutting it back, but you're still not gaining a stock-proof hedge. So you have to question, why are you doing it? So you have to be really clear as to what do you want out of the hedge? What do you want it to look like in 10 years' time, in 20 years' time? And then it becomes very obvious what to do, Michael, rather than saying this is the thing you do with every hedge.
Okay. And contractors are, I suppose, a vital part out there in terms of maintaining the hedges. And I suppose they probably see more of the hedges than the farmers themselves. And I think a lot of them probably have their own way of doing it in terms of they have, maybe they're used to cutting hedges on the side of the roads, which tend to be cut maybe quite severely, and perhaps that leaks into farms. So obviously then, and everything we've talked about already, the farmer needs to have a good conversation with that contractor before the work starts. How does that
absolutely critical?
Yeah. How does that farmer start that conversation to make sure that the farmer gets what he wants, if you like?
I think the first thing is just to have it, because what we've found from our own research is that the farmers think the contractors know best. The contractors think they're doing what the farmers want, and they all think they're doing what the neighbours and the general public think looks nice. And in the end, it's a vicious circle there that really needs to be broken. And I've worked with contractors all the years, and contractors do a job for money. And in my experience, they will do what the farmer wants. but they really want to please the farmer, and currently they tend to think that a lovely, neat job that you can put a level on, they take pride in their work. But so they must. I'd be very disappointed if the farmer said to the contractor they wanted it done in so that the hedge is fit for birds and bees, that the contractor then wouldn't do it or wouldn't be able to do it. So it's really about the conversation that you have mentioned, Michael. And the main thing is just to have it. Can you cut the hedges that they're friendly for birds and bees? That's the question, I suppose, to start with.
And that's a very simple, I suppose, instruction to give to a contractor. Leave my hedge so that it's fit for birds and bees. I think that's a very nice way of putting it. For the contractor then themselves, is there a way, or is there some training or some guidance there that a contractor can easily get their hands on to know what that actually means? Make sure my hedge is fit for birds and bees?
We do offer formal training every year in Pallaskenry College. Now, in recent years, there hasn't been much of an uptake for it for contractors. Now, that's the formal side, oftentimes where they're looking for work from, tendering for work, and they value having the certificate. But again, we work with the contractor organisations to try and do. I mean, this year, if were not COVID, we would be having events, and I think we'd be working with the likes of you, Michael, on tillage events to show. So obviously we're not out and about now, so it's all about the literature. And Teagasc Hedgerow Week in December will be supplying lots of videos, including contractors, on how to cut the hedges right. So yeah, we have lots of material at the moment. Don't hesitate to contact Teagasc at any point.
Okay, plenty of that material on www.teagasc.ie. Catherine, I just want to ask you one very final question, and you mentioned it as we were going through. You mentioned margins, and we kind of skirted past it quite quickly there. Obviously, on tillage farms, you have the hedge, but you can also have the margin beside it. How should these be, or is there an ideal width for them? When should they be cut? Is there a frequency of when they should be cut? What's your advice for farmers on that side of it?
Yeah, and your first question or comment there was that they're beside the hedge. You could also have a grassy margin between two crops, between two fields along a wire fence. It's a different habitat, but it's very, very, very good, and almost, as good as a hedge. Management is, if we do not cut them, they'll turn into scrub. Scrub can be good, but that is not what we're looking for here. We're looking for a rough grassy margin. So the ideal is to cut either once every 3 years, or cut 1/3 of them every year, or, even if they're cut every year, that's fine. But the main thing is to cut after flowering. So cut late autumn, winter. As I said, every year, every 2 years, every 3 years. And you'll have a lovely, lovely structure there that you'll have spiders and invertebrates, over winter in those big clumps of grass. It's a bit like what you see along the side of a lovely, country road. You see all the lovely stuff that's there. You do not see the docks and the thistles and the nettles that people don't like in the margins. They're only there because nutrients are gone in. So, there's some lovely stuff everybody knows along the sides of the road. That's the sort of stuff we would love to see in a grassy margin on farms.
Okay, Catherine, very thankful for your time today. I know you're busy and you're out and about down in Cork looking at some of the aforementioned hedges. So look, thanks very much for your time. We hope maybe to catch up with you again maybe in next year at some stage. Thanks again, Catherine.
You're very welcome, Michael. Bye-bye.
That's it for the Tillage Edge this week, and my thanks to Catherine for joining me on the podcast. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe on Apple Podcasts or Spotify so you never miss an episode. And for more farming information, go to teagasc.ie. I'm Michael Hennessy. Thanks for listening, and I'll be back in 2 weeks with more tillage news and advice.